Hi guys, and today we're going to be covering chapter 1, which is support and movement. And just like the previous chapters, there will be a set of review questions that you will need to answer and submit. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about the skeletal system and the muscular system today. All right, and these are all the key terms. Let's get rid of that. There we go. All right, so these are all the key terms that you're going to need to know, and we'll go through them and make sure you understand them. All right, so the skeletal system is, the purpose of it is to support the body and to protect the major organs. The skeletal system and the muscular system are interconnected to each other. You can't have movement without both of these working together. In a way, you could say it's roughly, what's the term that, irreducibly complex, okay? So the entire human body is technically irreducibly complex because these systems just are so intricately connected to each other that if one is missing, the others won't function, okay? So an infant, when it's born, will have 270 bones, and they'll be made out of cartilage, okay? And as they grow, the bones will ossify, and ossification is simply where the cartilage gets replaced with calcium, okay? It becomes harder and more rigid, okay? And so by the time they're an adult, they will have 206 bones. So the number of bones decreases. We'll explain why later on, okay? The skeleton of the human is divided into two parts: the axial skeleton, which consists of the skull, the ribs, the sternum, and the vertebrae, okay, so the backbone, and that's about 80 bones. The rest of the bones consist of the appendicular skeleton, okay, and the appendicular skeleton, sorry, my cats are all over the place today. The appendicular skeleton is the arms, the legs, the pectoral girdle, so right here, and also the pelvic region, so the hip bones, okay, what we would call the pelvic girdle, okay. So most of the cartilage that gets ossified, it remains the same at the end of the bones, okay. Okay, let me rephrase that. Cartilage gets ossified in most of the bone, but at the end of the bones, the cartilage remains the same, okay? So it has to, because when two bones meet together, that's where a joint is, okay? And if they rub against each other without any cushion, it will actually wear the bone down, and that can cause problems. So the cartilage is there to help ease the wear and tear, okay? Ligaments attach to hold bones together. So a ligament attaches a bone to a bone, okay? And in between the bone, there are there's connective tissue called the joint capsule that covers the end of bones to form the joint. And if you hear these noises, my cats are, stop it. Okay, let's try that again. All right, so ligaments attach bone to bone, and joint capsule is the covering at the end of the bones that form the joint, okay? The synovial fluid is the inner cavity, is inside the inner cavity where the two bones meet, okay? On page 416, there is a diagram that shows the synovial fluid that's kind of like in between the two bones there. And then there's also bursa, okay? And bursa are located between the moving parts of the joints, like ligaments and bones. They reduce friction between the structures as they move. So bursitis would be inflammation of these areas, if you've heard that term. All right, so joints, okay? So there are different types of joints in the body, and we're going to have a lab where we talk about this in a little more detail. But immovable joints, a good example would be in the skull, the sutures, okay, and pretty much as it says, an immovable joint does not move. It's just the place where two bones meet, okay. A pivot joint is where there's rotation and swivel, and the top two vertebrae in the neck, okay, the C1 and the C2 vertebrae, the cervical 1 and the cervical 2, those are pivot, and those two together allow the head to swivel and to rotate. Pivot. You guys have heard what pivoting is. Slightly movable joints would be the ones in your vertebrae that causes you to bend and to move forward and backward and stuff like that. So they move a little bit. Ball and socket joints, it's where there's a ball and kind of like a cup like this, and it allows for rotation here, and you find that in your shoulders and also in your hip bones, okay. The socket in the hip bones is actually deeper than the ones in the shoulder area. Hinge joints are ones that work like a hinge joint. They can only, or door, they can only bend in one direction. A good example would be your elbow. So it only bends like this. It may look like it's moving in different, but that's your shoulder rotating. But you can bend your arm only one way. You can only bend your knee in one direction. You can't bend your knee outward, which would be weird. And then you have gliding joints, okay? And gliding joints in the wrist and ankle bones, they're slightly convex and concave in their shapes, and that allows them to guide for different types of movement, okay? All right. So bones are made up of cells that are living and they are changing.